pull it out of the ground, which is a great annoyance to farmers who happen to be farming in the area. Leviathan, on the other hand, is, after all of the discussion, really regarded as the crocodile. The Nile crocodile particularly, but these large crocodiles proliferate in the Far East and in Australia. And I've seen photographs of a couple of them, 15 feet long, and there's one crocodile in Africa named Gustav, who's reputed to be 20 feet long. Now, I don't know whether you can picture 20 feet in your mind. I'm 5'7". So lay me down 3 or 4 times, and that's the size of the crocodile, and it is a formidable animal. He doesn't have any hesitation in attacking whatever he sees as potential food. One of the photographs I saw, he had the end of an elephant's trunk, and the elephant was trying to swing him off. And I think the only way elephant was going to succeed was if the crocodile actually bit through his trunk, because they don't let go. They're not like alligators. Alligators are sissies compared to crocodiles. And I have 2 pictures of 15 feet long crocodiles, one from Australia and one from Africa, somewhere near the border between Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And they are, there's a crowd of people looking at this dead alligator. Now, Gustav apparently is not dead. There's several bullet marks on his hide, but he ain't dead yet, apparently. Anyway. Chapter 40. Job's given an opportunity to speak. Verse 1, Yahweh answered Job and said, "Will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it." And so Job is presumptuous. He wanted to contend with God about why he had suffered all of these things. And this is the problem of not only pain, but the justice of God. Would a just God create people who suffer this intractable pain for no apparent reason? Because we learned in chapter 1 that Job was a righteous man. He was highly esteemed by God. So Job answers Yahweh and says, verse 4, "Behold, I'm insignificant. What can I respond to you? I placed my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, and I will not answer, even twice, and I will add nothing more." Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, and if your memory serves you correctly, you will remember that God often spoke out of a whirlwind. And so this is a sign of God's appearance not in the actual form of God, but in something else. You remember that Moses was intrigued by the burning bush, which burnt and never was consumed by the flames, and they call that a theophany. And so this whirlwind is a theophany. And so he says to Job, "Now gird up your loins like a man. I will ask, and you make me know." Girding up your loins is another way of saying, get ready for it. Get ready for the argument. I'm going to give you some questions, And you answer. Verse 8, will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? Or do you have an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? And so, again, he's bracing Job with this idea that God has been attacked by Job. And does he really have the power to do this kind of thing? So Job has been very presumptuous. Now, as God speaks, adorn yourself with exaltation and loftiness, and clothe yourselves with splendor and majesty. This is a reference to getting ready to make a judgment. In the ancient cities, the men would go and sit, or the wise men of the town or city would sit near the gate, and there people could find them and bring their cases to them. And so God is alluding to that. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone who's proud, and make him low. So judge would usually sit above everybody else. Everyone had to look up to him. And if you think of all of the court cases you've seen on television, the judge is always higher than everybody else in the courtroom. And he wears a robe to indicate that he has this power. Look on verse 13, hide them in the dust together, bind their faces in the hidden place. Then I will also praise you, that your own right hand can save you. So if Job could carry out all of these things, then God would be able to praise him. So if he couldn't do all of those things, he just had to leave the matter in the hand of God and get on with it. Now we actually turn to the verses which deal with Behemoth. Behold now Behemoth, and the commentators regard the term Behemoth, which is Hebrew, as an adaptation from some Egyptian or Aramaic writing, which means ox of the water. And that ox of the water was regarded as an emblem of Egypt. So God says, behold now Behemoth, which I made along with you. And so that'll tell you that this was not a mythological creature. God made it. It eats grass like an ox. I've already mentioned that. Behold now its power in its loins, and its vigor in the muscles of its belly. It is a powerful looking animal, and one that you might be very cautious about approaching. But your caution today would be well placed, because it will run over you if you get in its way. I had one of the guys who was a student at the college later on, went as a missionary in Swaziland. But before he came to the college, he was in the army, and he was on patrol in the Zambezi Valley near Lake Kariba, which was the lake formed by the Zambezi River. And he was on patrol, and he heard this crashing in the undergrowth, and this hippo came out charging. And all he could do was, he was knocked down actually by the hippo. He fell down, but he happened to be near a big tree stump, which is what probably saved his life, because the hippo stumbled and fell and his fall was broken by the tree stump, and then it got up and just fled for the river. So it wasn't after him, it was trying to get back to the river because it had been scared by something. Verse 17, it hangs its tail like a cedar. They think like a cedar branch, not like a cedar tree. It's got a funny little corkscrew tail, and it does weird things with it. And then, continuing verse 17, the sinews of its thighs are knit together, its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like bars of iron. They're not very long legs. In proportion to the body, they're short and stumpy. And so what it's doing is it's heading for the river. Verse 19, it is the first of the ways of God. Probably an allusion to the idea that it was the biggest of the animals. Now the crocodile is different. It doesn't loom as large. It's pretty flat to the ground. So behemoth would look like a fairly dangerous animal, but in fact it's not. Continuing verse 19, let its maker bring near its sword. And that's probably a reference to the big incisor. The incisor horns are probably about that long. They look like they're flattened off at the top. And they can rip another hide open quite easily. Surely the mountains bring its food, and all the beasts of the fields play there. So it goes on the hillsides, fairly not very steep hillsides, in order to graze on grass. Under the lotus plants it lies down, in the hidden place of the reeds and the marsh. And photographers have made films of the hippo underwater, and it's fairly balanced buoyancy, so it can walk on the floor of a river quite easily. And it can last for a considerable time underwater. It has to come up to breathe. But it can close its ears and its nose so that it submerges like a sub, and there it walks under you can picture it under the lotus leaves. There's the lotus flowers floating on the water, and the old hippo just strolling along on the bottom of the river. If a river oppresses, it is not alarmed, it is secure, though the Jordan burst forth to its mouth. So he doesn't worry about floods. He's just as happy as can be. The more floods, the more place I have to walk. Can anyone capture it before its eyes with snares? Can anyone pierce its nose? And so the answer to that, the way the grammar is constructed, the answer to that is no, you can't. Could Job do it? No. And yet it's under God's control. So he's showing that this tremendous beast with its great power is under the control of God. Leviathan. But that's another story. There are a lot of modern critics who contend that this was, in fact, a mythological creature. One stepped out of that line of argument and said it's a large sea creature of some kind, large sea monster. But most commentators say it's the Nile crocodile, and it's noted for its great strength. And so the Nile crocodile is the most likely way of understanding this. Perhaps the way that people described it, because it was such a frightening creature, and if you saw it, you felt the menace from this creature. The way they described it may sound like something mythological, but I don't believe it was. I think the Nile crocodile is the correct way of understanding it. So, verse 1, and we're in chapter 41, can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Well, if you see even a relatively small crocodile, you know that a fishhook's not going to be any good at all. Or press down its tongue with a cord. Impossible again. Can you put a rope in its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? No. Will it make many supplications to you, or will he speak to you soft words? There's nothing soft about the crocodile's approach. If he's after you, he has one thing in his mind: food. And he'll eat humans just as he will any other animal. And he's an ambush attacker. He can lie dead still near the riverbank. He may look like a log that has fallen in the river. And everybody has to get water. And if you're in the African bush, your only source of water is a nearby river. And guess who gets to go down to the river to get the water? Usually the young girls. So I've seen 10, 11, 12-year-old girls with a 4-gallon drum of water on their head, going down to the river, filling it, bringing it home. That's their job. The young boys are herding the cattle and keeping them away from the crocs. Verse 4, will it cut a covenant with you? Cut a covenant is a Hebrew term for making an agreement, a treaty, making some kind of agreement of friendship with somebody else. And will the alligator, or not the alligator, will the crocodile do that? Absolutely no. The only thing he wants to do with you is eat you. Will you take it for a slave forever? Will you play with it as with a bird, or will you bind it for your young woman? In other words, you're going to put a rope on it and make it a pet for your young kids? Absolutely not. Will traders bargain over it? Will they divide it among the merchants? Now, at that time, it was not a matter of trade, but it did become a matter of trade. In fact, we visited a crocodile farm where they raised crocodiles, because at one time it was one of the favorite leathers for handbags and things like that, shoes, crocodile shoes, until PETA arrived, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. For some reason, they thought it was not ethical to kill crocodiles or raise them just for their skin. But of course, they didn't mind, well, even now, lion skins, any kind of animal pelt is not ethically traded. Verse 7, can you fill its skin with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? Well, those don't work very well. In fact, there's a crocodile in Africa whose name is Gustav, 20 feet long. They think that he has eaten at least 200 people. And the bullet scars show that they tried to kill him and they weren't successful. So they're bad things. Verse 8, place your hand on it. Remember the battle. You will not do that again. And I have personal experience of that with just a little crocodile, probably the length of about 3 chairs here. And it was lying, basking in the sun, in an enclosure. The enclosure was about this high, and it was made of asbestos, reinforced asbestos. And it was lying so still, I thought, well, I'll see if I can wake it up. And I leaned over with my finger and went like that, and in a flash, the crocodile's tail came one way, its mouth came another, just so quick. It scared me. But I still have my finger. So I thought, well, I'll try a steel rod. I found some rebar about that thick, and I gave it another prod. It left a tooth mark on the rebar. So they're not the kind of animal that you want to mess around with. And so when it says here, place your hand on it, you will not do that again. Very true. Behold, its expectation is a lie. Will he be laid low even at the sight of it? No one is so fierce that he dares to arouse it. Who then is he that can stand before me? Who is given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. And so God does not have to repay us for anything. And if we cannot stand before God, we certainly cannot stand before the crocodile. And this is God's challenge. Verse 12, it will not keep silence concerning its limbs or its mighty strength or its graceful frame. Who can strip off its outer armor? Who can come with its double bridle or double jaw? Who can open the doors of his face, or the jaws, in other words? Around his teeth there is dreadful terror. Its strong scales are its pride, shut up as with a tight seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They cling one to another. They are interlocked and cannot be separated. And so very, very tough hide, as you can tell by the Gustav's bullet marks on his back. Its sneezes flash forth light, and its eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Some people, there's been a lot of speculation, and this is one of the expressions that gave rise to some of the arguments that this was a mythical creature, because when it sneezes, it flashes forth light. But when the crocodile breathes out spray in the early morning light, it might look like something is flashing. And so that's probably what they were thinking of, or what impressed them. When it's lying in wait, all you can see are the nostril and an eye. Well, everything else can be submerged. So that when it's looking out for prey, that may be all you see. When it's lying in wait, it might look like a log, and you'd be tempted to go and haul it out of the water. So that's maybe what it's talking like when it mentions the eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of its mouth, and these next three verses are regarded as highly poetic and therefore figurative. I have no explanations for it. And this is one of the reasons that people go for some kind of mythical creature. Listen, out of its mouth go burning torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of its nostrils, smoke goes forth as from a boiling pot and burning reeds. Its breath kindles coals, and a flame goes forth from its mouth. I don't have any explanation for that. I'll leave you to dream up some kind of theory, and I'm sure a lot of you will do so. This is fun, to make theories out of something you don't understand. But I don't know how to handle that. Verse 22, in its neck lodges strength. Dismay leaps before it. The folds of its flesh cling together, hardened upon it, and it is not shaken. Its heart is as hard as a stone, even as hard as a lower millstone. When it raises itself up, the mighty fear because of the crashing, they are bewildered. And crocodiles can run for a fairly good distance at a much greater speed than you imagine. I don't think you could outrun one. Those little legs in proportion to the body are very strong, and they are very agile when they run. So I don't think you can go near the edge of the water and poke it with a stick. If it wants to come out, if you look tasty enough, and if you're a human, you're tasty enough already. You don't have to look heavy or beautiful or whatever. He's coming for you. When it raises itself up, the mighty fear because of the crashing, they're bewildered. The sword that reaches it cannot avail, nor the spear, the dart, the javelin. They've tried throwing everything at it. And the only thing that succeeds bullets if you hit the right place. But as Gustav will tell you, there are lots of places the bullets aren't going to bother me. It regards iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make it flee. Sling stones are turned into stubble for it. Clubs are regarded as stubble. It laughs at the rattling of the javelin. Its underparts are like sharp potsherds, and the underparts are where they get the favorite crocodile skin for the handbags and so on. And even though it looks a lot softer, it's not that much softer. It spreads out like a threshing sledge on the mire. It is very flat underneath, and so it lies on the flat. In fact, the troopies used to call them flat dogs, but I think they were a little bit underestimating it. It makes the depths boil like a pot. It makes the sea like a jar of ointment. The favorite mode of attack for the crocodile is to grab an arm, a leg, or what it can, and then it rolls. So it spins end over end in order to disorient the prey, and it will drag it under and drown it. And then it usually stores this carcass which it's created after killing its prey. It stores it underground until the meat rots off the bones, and then it will eat. So not a pleasant kind of animal at all in any way. Behind it, it makes a wake to shine. One would think the deep to be grey-haired, and sometimes as they travel underwater, they leave a trail that's like a foam, and that's what it's talking about when it says it looks grey-haired. There's nothing upon the dust like it, one made without terror. So there's no animal that's made without terror like the crocodile. He's made so that he's terrifying. It looks on everything that is high. It is king over all the sons of pride, all the proud animals. It has to be a pretty small crocodile for lions to try and attack it. And they usually don't win. Crocodile usually wins. So God's shown Job that he has infinite power. He can create a creature that's looks big, but is harmless, like the hippopotamus, or a creature that is big and absolutely terrifying, like the crocodile. You can argue with me about the crocodile, whether it's an actual creature or mythological. Or you can try and argue, because I ain't going to argue. I think it is the crocodile. I think the mythical thing just goes too far. But there are always critics who want to take down the Word of God. So they want to say, well, it's filled with these myths from the ancient East or the Middle East. So after that, we've come to the end, chapter 42. And Job is the speaker who answers Yahweh and says, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Now he's going to quote something God said. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? And after the quote, he continues, therefore, I have declared that which I did not understand, things too marvelous for me, which I did not know. In other words, I spoke out of ignorance. And this is what God is trying to help Job to see. You're ignorant, you do not know enough to make these kind of criticisms of me. The universe which I've created and this world which is part of it is too intricate for you to understand. And I'm the one who made everything. So you don't understand these things. You don't understand this world. Now you see that I've put all of these creatures in the world, some harmless, some useful, but some extremely dangerous. So we live in a world that is dangerous. And we're all going to be affected by this danger in some way or other. It would be very rare for there to be no one in this audience who has never suffered. Everybody suffered at some time or other. Some more seriously than others. Some have recovered, some are still suffering out of injuries or illnesses or conditions. And that's just the way it is. And then then Job continues with another quote from God. Hear now and I will speak. I will ask you and you make me know. And Job says, I have heard you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes sees you. And so I've heard you speaking, but now I understand. Therefore, I reject myself. And in some translations, I despise myself. And I repent in dust and ashes. So that's the conclusion for Job. Yes, he suffered without cause, but in the process of his suffering, he has said many things which are foolish and things which are really disrespectful of God. And so he imputed some bad attitude to God even, regarded God as his enemy. And now he's had to confess that this was wrong. I repent in dust and ashes. Now it happened after Yahweh had spoken these words to Job that Yahweh said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my anger burns against you and against your two friends, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So Job said a lot of things that were right. And Eliphaz is the one who receives the charge against himself and his friends. So now, take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job will pray for you. For I will accept him, so that I may not do with you according to your folly or your foolishness, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. In other words, their theology that if you're suffering, it's because you sinned, and if you prosper, it's because you've been right with God. And the friends had that attitude. They never let it go. They kept on hammering at Job to try and get him to admit that he'd done wrong. So Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as Yahweh told them, and Yahweh accepted Job. And Yahweh restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends, and Yahweh increased all that Job had twofold. Then all his brothers and all his sisters and all who had known him before came to him, and they ate bread in his house, and they consoled him and comforted him for all the calamity that Yahweh had brought on him. And that's not true. It was Satan who had brought the calamity on him. And each gave him a casita, and each a ring of gold. Casita is an ancient currency of some kind. It is mentioned in Genesis and Joshua, but no one really knows exactly what its value was, but obviously had some value because they were presented to him. And one of the questions that comes up, where were all of these family and friends, brothers and sisters? Where were they when Job was in these dire straits? Only Eliphaz and his companions had come to try and console Job. Where were all these great friends? Now that Job's okay, we can go back and visit him again. We won't get in trouble for it. Yahweh blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 pairs of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. That's exactly double what he had before. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. These are restored. Only the girls are named. The first girl was named Jemima, which means a dove. The second, Keziah, which is a form of cassia, a variety of cinnamon. And then Karen Hapuch, which means the horn of antimony. And this was a beauty product. It would be put in a little horn to carry around. It's like carrying around a tube of makeup, is basically what it means. Apparently it was an intense black substance which was used to put around the eyes to magnify them, make them look more beautiful. It's eyeshadow, guys. Now, in all the land, no woman were found so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them inheritance among their brothers, which would probably have been unusual for the time. It doesn't say anything about Job's wife, but so we don't know why. Maybe she had been so offensive in what she said, curse God and die, that there was no place for any reward for her. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his grandsons 4 generations. And Job died an old man and full of days. And so that concludes Job. And we did it on time. Wife has no name. What he called her may have been unprintable, I don't know. Thank you.